So, how did you first interact or come in association with Paulos Gregorius Tirumeni?
You know that I must say that it was probably a conspiracy of circumstances or a providential. Probably it was more providential than a conspiracy of circumstances, because it was my professor, Professor K.M. Tharagal, who was a very well-known literary critic and writer, and who was a great admirer and student of Paulos Gregorius Tirumeni, who introduced me to Paulos Gregorius Tirumeni in Kerala Darshanika Samadhi, that was Kerala Philosophical Society. It was in one of their meetings held in Ernakulam. If I don't remember wrong, it was in Chavara Cultural Center that this meeting was being held. And Professor Taragan invited me to be an observer, to attend this. I am not a participant, I was not a member. I was very young, probably a raw young man at the time. And so he introduced me to Paulos Gregorius Tirumeni as one of his favorite students. And that was when I first met him and listened to him. Then I had several other occasions. Particularly, he was closely associated with the Malankara Orthodox Syrian Church Medical Mission and now Medical College in Kolancheri. So two metropolitans, Paulos Mar Gregorios and Philippos Mar Theophilos, considered Kolancheri Medical Mission, Malankara Orthodox Syrian Church Medical Mission, as their pet institution, and therefore they were very closely associated with it. And I was a member of the general body and the governing board of the Malankara Medical Mission at that time, and I was teaching in St. Peter's College, Kolancheri, just joined as a fresh teacher. So it was in Kolancheri that I had the opportunity to meet him further and strengthen our contact. And then later I approached him to get clarifications on some of the theological and philosophical dilemma that used to trouble me. Because that again gave us opportunity to know each other better, and for me to turn to him as a teacher. So this is how I got introduced to him and became very close to Paulos Gregorius Tirumeni. Later we had other opportunities as well. Probably we may talk about them later. During the national emergency in India, there were certain common concerns which brought us together. And later, his association with Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and Paulos Gregorius Tirumeni introduced me to His Holiness in my absence, and I was invited to attend one of their important conferences because of this introduction that he gave about me to His Holiness. So these are all later events which brought us together. And finally, we worked together in the reconciliation of the two factions, warring factions in the church, the Orthodox and the Jacobite factions. I traditionally belonged to the Jacobite faction, but I was for reconciliation and peace. And so we started an initiative, and Gregorius Tirumeni was the convener of the reconciliation committee, which was constituted by the Orthodox faction. I was not officially a member of any committees, but we had very informal discussions with Paulos Gregorius Tirumeni. That was the final kind of association with him.
Sir, as you mentioned, various occasions of your interactions. So let's just begin with the national emergency period when Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister of India. How and what was the experiences that you had, especially in association with Tirumeni, and how did it went along?
I was actually a member of the International Congress for some time. And I had to come out of the party because of ideological differences. And during emergency, I was very strongly against the emergency and the draconian laws that were brought in during the emergency. So in the group to which I belonged, which was called the Congress Radicals, who were all removed from the party, and we were working outside the party. And so I was at that time very active in the JP movement, Jayaprakash Narayan's Total Revolution movement. And so I had a kind of a track record of anti-emergency activities. I had some official role to play in these anti-emergency activities. And later on, there was Dr. M.M. Thomas in Tiruvalla, who was also part of the Dynamic Action Group. And they were also clearly against the emergency. And we were all concerned with the distraught families of the political detainees in this country, particularly in the state of Kerala. And Gregorius Tirumeni had a very unique kind of relationship with Mrs. Gandhi, the then Prime Minister of India, who was responsible for the emergency. As he has personally divulged it to me, you see, he was introduced to Indira Gandhi by Dr. Alexander, who was a very senior bureaucrat and who was very close to Mrs. Gandhi and to the central government. So Tirumeni was introduced to Mrs. Gandhi, and Mrs. Gandhi had a kind of a clever way of understanding and assessing people. She was very skillful in that. And so she recognized the wisdom of Paulus Gregorius Tirumeni. And Tirumeni was given an opportunity to call on her without prior notice. And so Tirumeni used to meet her and say that this emergency, maybe it was essential according to her estimation of the national situation. It was essential that an emergency should be declared. But Paulus Gregorius Tirumeni, I would even venture to say that advised Mrs. Gandhi not to continue this emergency indefinitely and not to keep political detainees for a long period in detention, particularly the senior leaders. And I understand that Mrs. Gandhi took this advice of Paulus Gregorius Tirumeni seriously and released or started releasing political detainees in batches, maybe a few days or a few weeks after this advice was given to her by Paulus Gregorius Tirumeni. So Paulus Gregorius Tirumeni was really concerned about the families of the political detainees, not only about the political detainees, but also about their families. So when we were actually formulating a scheme to help the families financially and otherwise, Paulus Gregorius Tirumeni agreed to cooperate with us. And so that was how we worked together on this small, for him, this was not a very important thing, but for the families, it was very important. And he recognized the importance. And therefore, it was in this program that we happened to meet a few times and discuss how to do this, work out the modalities. And we kind of operated this scheme very well during those days. And I understand that Mrs. Gandhi probably was a little skeptical about the political fallout of accepting the advice of Paulus Gregorius Tirumeni in full, and therefore she was trying to accept and implement them incrementally, and that led to further delay, and that was what finally led to the defeat of Mrs. Gandhi, because the time of declaration of the elections became late. Otherwise, Paulus Gregorius Tirumeni believed that if she had accepted his suggestion and did the elections earlier than, in 1977, when she really in March, when the elections were held, probably she would not have been routed in North India as it happened in 77. This is his assessment. And I think that there is some point in what he said.
Sir, in what ways Mark Gregorius had close association with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and later on having you having an association with his works?
Paulus Gregorius Sirmeni was a seeker. He was a seeker all through. And he wanted to study all philosophies. Uh, and therefore, he turned to Buddhism. Of course, he studied Hinduism and he had his own interpretation of Hinduism. He had, I understand, greater respect for Aurobindo rather than for Dr. Radhakrishnan, because he thought that Aurobindo was a deeper person than Dr. Radhakrishnan, and so on. Dr. Radhakrishnan was actually trying to interpret Hinduism to the taste of the Western audience, while Sri Aurobindo was delving deep and deep into the mystic dimension of Hinduism. So that was why probably Paulus Gregorius Sirmeni thought higher about Aurobindo than about Dr. Radhakrishnan. Anyway, that's not the point. So it was during this search that he read Buddhism. And the study of Buddhism, it was the study of Buddhism that actually led him to meeting His Holiness the Dalai Lama and having serious discussions about some of the very intricate issues which were explained by Nagarjuna in very great detail. I think Paulus Gregorius Sirmeni thought that Nagarjuna was probably probably the greatest Indian thinker and philosopher than anyone else. And so he has mentioned in some of his articles. I remember, I'm recollecting from my faint memory, he thought very high of Nagarjuna and his interpretation. So it was his study of Buddhism, particularly, the way Buddhism dealt with the concept of God. Buddhism, some people say that it is an atheistic faith because it does not, the system is not based on an understanding of God or an explanation of God. It is not a God-centered philosophy and religion. So the concept of emptiness, what is called shunyata. So Tirumeni wanted to be more enlightened about this. And that was what drew him to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama has a charisma. Those who have met him will know that he was a very charismatic person. Probably he was one of the most charismatic persons that I had the privilege to meet. So that was what brought them together. Two great minds living in India came together, and they had several sessions of very personal discussions, dialogue on very subtle philosophical and religious issues. And so they became very, very intimate friends. I know they became very intimate friends. I had another friend in the Gandhian movement. He was my friend, brother, and teacher called Ravindra Varma. And Ravindra Varma was probably closer to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, because Dalai Lama considered Ravindra Varma, who was earlier a minister in the Morarji Desai government and all that. So he considered Ravindra Varmaji to be his friend. And sometimes he jokingly said that Varmaji is my teacher also. So Varmaji also introduced me to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So I was a very fortunate person, Father, to be introduced to such a great man, a person, a great teacher like His Holiness, by two of the most eminent people of India, Ravindra Varma on the one side and Paulus Gregorius Sirmeni on the other side. Who is more fortunate than that? Sometimes I overjoy myself on thinking how fortunate I have been. That's how I became. And so there was a training for Buddhist teachers in Delhi, and His Holiness wanted Paulus Gregorius Sirmeni to talk to them about the Christian concept of ecology. And Sirmeni had to go to Germany. He was not in India at that time. Then His Holiness asked him, can you propose somebody? And he proposed my name. It was a shock to me to hear that Trimeni proposed my name to take his place in this particular program for the training program for the teachers. So I went and made a presentation, and Trimeni asked me to write down what I talked to them. I wrote them down and gave it to Trimeni. He asked me to develop it into a paper. I developed it into a paper and published it in Gandhi Mark, Journal of Gandhi Peace Foundation. And Trimeni advised me to develop it into a book, a small book, which I did not do, and I could not do, and I did not do yet. It's still in my unfulfilled agenda of things to be done in future. Probably I don't know whether I'll be able to fulfill them. This is the story about meeting Dalai Lama.
Sir, how instrumental do you consider the role of Mark Gregorius in peacemaking efforts in the Malankara?
You see, as Achan Prabhu, you know that Trimeni believed that his basic position is a Christian position. And a Christian position meant not what people generally mean by Christian. He has explained it. He said that I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and God. And he had repeatedly stated that this is the basis of my faith. And he has repeatedly said that Jesus loved all creation, not only Christians or a section of people. He loved every creation, humans and non-humans. And he died for them. He died for human beings. And so that was his first article of faith. Then he said that human beings commit mistakes, living beings commit mistakes, and creation suffers as a result of that. There is a brokenness in creation. And this brokenness has to be reconciled. It has to be corrected. It has to be reconciled. And creations have to be made whole, if you use it in the plural, meaning, and God wants to exist, to dwell in this reconciled and whole creation, along with human beings. And that was the ultimate joy that human beings can enjoy. And that was when God also will be joyful. And so he was a man who believed that reconciliation is part of a divine plan, a divine program, or a divine plan, or a divine scheme. And therefore, people who claim to believe in Christ and follow Christ have no reason why they should quarrel over silly matters. And therefore, reconciliation and peace was part of his faith. And therefore, it was only natural that when the opportunity arrived with the Supreme Court judgment for these two factions in the same church to come together, and when there was an initiative taken from our side for reconciliation and peace, a small group of people, including myself, visited His Holiness Matthews II, and suggested to him that we should initiate a process of reconciliation. And then we suggested that it should be made formal. And therefore, both churches, both factions should appoint their committees, officially appoint their committees. And then the committees should sit together and discuss, sort out problems and how to overcome those, how to resolve those issues. And Paulus Gregorius Rimini was the natural selection as the convener of the reconciliation committee from the side of the Orthodox faction. And so a few meetings were held and discussions were made. And then Paulus Gregorius Rimini was very meticulous because he has worked in the World Council of Churches and many different international fora. He knew how to do it systematically. I was by then a teacher of Gandhian philosophy in the university, and I was teaching peace, reconciliation, and conflict resolution. And therefore, I was also kind of formally introduced in and trained in this. So Tirumeni used to invite me. Although I was not a member of any committee, I refused to be a member of any committee. But Tirumeni wanted me to go sit down with him, and then he will read out the notes that he has written, and then we will discuss and formalize, and then put everything into very systematic order. Because Tirumeni believed that all these documents, if they are properly concluded, will become historic documents. And therefore, he did not want there to be any kind of flaw in that. And therefore, he thought that I may be able, because of my training in just going through and finding out whether there are some improvements to be made or some suggestions to be made. He was very kind and very charitable to me in offering me this opportunity to go through the notes that he prepared and propose kind of changes if there are changes necessary. And so we had 3 or 4 such meetings, I remember. Unfortunately, this could not materialize. It was a tragic story, and so it could not materialize because of reasons that we all know. Tirumeni was very pained. He has also conveyed to me some of his personal agonies about this.
So, as you rightly mentioned earlier also, regarding the Kolanjeri Medical Mission, please explain your observations regarding the contribution of Metropolitan Ma Gregorius, especially in the development of Kolanjeri Medical Mission.
Kolanjeri was a very sleeping village. It was a village of ordinary people, but very enterprising people. So the land was not very fertile, and we were mainly an agricultural community. I also belong to Kolanjeri, and therefore people were very, very daring and very entrepreneurial. So they went into business. They made a lot of money, and the first thing that they made, those people who made money in Kolanjeri, coming from very ordinary lower middle class family backgrounds, the first thing they did was to build a beautiful church, to reconstruct the church. And the church became a kind of a showpiece, because I remember I was in school when this was happening. And there were people coming from the southern side. We say the southern side, that is from Pathanamthitta district and Kottarakara and Kottayam and Niranam, all those places, to see this beautiful church. Then the next thing was that, you see, we had no medical facilities. There was only a small government hospital. So we thought that we should, Ernakulam district itself had only one general hospital in Ernakulam. So we thought that the eastern side of the Ernakulam district suffered. And so they thought that we must have a hospital like Vellore Hospital. Because we have been going to Vellore, our people have been going to Vellore for treatment. And they thought that, the Malagra church must have a hospital like that in Kolanjeri. And therefore, the people brought land for this and handed it over to the church, saying that, the church, because people will not be able to, the ordinary people of Kolanjeri who are not very educated, not technically qualified, and they don't know how to set up a hospital. So the responsibility was handed over to the church. And we said that we will provide the necessary financial support and all that. But the church, as you know, slept over it for many years. And then the people said that if you are not able to do it, please give back the land, which we ourselves purchased and gave to the church. So the land was returned on condition that, you must build a hospital, but it must be in the name of the church. So we called it, we established the medical mission, we registered an association called Malangara Orthodox Syrian Church, as Malangara Orthodox Syrian Christian Medical Mission. That was the name of the association. They started it. And the entire property technically belonged to the Bava, the Catholicos of the East, Malangara Metropolitan. And then the terms and conditions of the relationship between the Malangara Medical Mission, which is a registered organization under the Charitable Institutions Act, with the Malangara Orthodox Church. The terms and conditions were discussed and decided by Paulos Grigorios Tirumeni and Philoxinos Tirumeni, Philippos Mar Philoxinos Tirumeni. Theophilos Thirumeni, not Philoxenos, Theophilos Thirumeni. So they were actually acting like a bridge between the church and the Malankara Orthodox Syrian Church Medical Mission, Kolanjeri. That's one thing. And then they also acted as kind of bridge building with the CMC, Christian Medical College and Medical Hospital in Vellore, and bringing doctors from there to Kolanjeri. You know, the first director of Kolanjeri Medical Mission was Dr. K.C. Maman, son of K.M. Cherian of Malayalam Manorama. He was in Vellore. He was well settled and well rooted in Vellore. But he was persuaded to come to Kolanjeri. And these Thirumenis were instrumental in that. Both Paulos Gregorius Thirumeni and Philippos Theophilus Thirumeni were instrumental in doing that. And also, some of the foreign funding agencies were also invited to Kolanjeri. And for example, the Blinded Mission in Germany, they came and saw this, and so started helping us in setting up an ophthalmology department and a community health program. All these things were possible because of these 2-3 minutes. And the hospital and also the people who was associated with the hospital were very close to their heart. They loved the hospital like their own creation, and nurtured it, helped to build it, brought fame to it, protected it in times of crisis. And so even now, we hold an annual memorial lecture in honor of Paulos Gregorius Thirumeni. And we have the Day of Remembrance is definitely observed with the dignity and reverence it deserves every year.
Sir, in your understanding, what are your thoughts about Ma Gregorius' understanding about Mahatma Gandhi and Gandhian ethics?
You know, Thirumeni, of course, was a great admirer of Mahatma Gandhi. And he has understood the core philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi. Because the two basic principles of Mahatma Gandhi was truth and non-violence. And the application of truth, which is called Satyagraha. And Mahatma Gandhi was also a person who is often called a karma yogi, a man of action. And his saga of action, as we all know, is very momentous. It's almost gigantic. You know, crossing 2 continents. He started work in South Africa, came to India, fought the British, who was probably the greatest military and financial power of the world at the time, and using the method of non-violent action, Satyagraha. And for achieving this, you know, he had to keep a personal discipline, inner strength, what Paulos Gregorius Thirumeni has called an indomitable will. Gandhi had an indomitable will, and I remember in some of the talks where he made references to Gandhi, he always spoke very enthusiastically about the great willpower of Mahatma Gandhi. And, you know, and the root of the willpower is the inner discipline. Gregorius Thirumeni knew that. It was the inner discipline. And the inner discipline was due to 2 things. I'm just speaking about Gregorius Thirumeni's understanding of Gandhi, not my understanding or estimation of Gandhi. And one was the root of his action, or the method of his action, which was completely disinterested and dispassionate, anasakti, selfless, not having any eye at the fruit of the action, but disinterested. Anasakti yoga, Gandhi has called it anasakti yoga. His karma yoga was that kind of an action. Selfless, disinterested, committed action without expecting anything in return. And Gandhi also was a man of great sacrifice. And Paulos Gregorius Thirumeni has underlined this aspect of sacrifice in Gandhi's work. because this was something that Gandhi shared with Jesus. Jesus spoke about sacrificial love, love which requires to sacrifice yourself completely for the sake of the realization of your love. And Gandhi sacrificed his life like Jesus sacrificed his life. So the aspect of sacrifice also was highlighted by his Paulus Gregorius ceremony. And but I think there are two things about which I think Tirumeni did not understand Gandhi properly or correctly or fully. And one is about the term Satyagraha. Gregorius Rimini once, when he was answering the allegation that Mahatma Gandhi was a communalist by E.M. Shankaran Namboodiripad in one of his articles. And Paulus Gregorius Rimini gave a reply to this. And in this reply, Paulus Gregorius Rimini mentioned about Gandhi's concept of truth and Satyagraha. And he said that it is not Satyagraha, but Satyagraha. And Tirumeni interpreted it like Satyagraha means understanding truth, grasping truth, comprehending truth in its true sense. And truth possessing, taking possession of the person who is understanding truth. And that is how he has explained the meaning of Satyagraha, which is not actually the correct interpretation, because Gandhi himself has written about it. You know, the term Satyagraha was coined in South Africa in 1906 because they were offering non-violent direct action, which at that time was called passive resistance, because that was the term used by Christian pacifists. And that was the term popular in the West. And that was the term which will be intelligible to the West. And therefore, Gandhi made use of that term, passive resistance. But he knew that passive resistance was not a proper term. It was an incomplete term to really characterize what they were doing. It was more than your passive resistance. It was active resistance. And therefore, Gandhi wanted a new term. And so he invited suggestions from the readers of Indian Opinion. That was his journal in South Africa. And many people gave suggested names. And his own nephew, Madanlal Gandhi, gave the name Sadagraha. That is firmness in a good cause. That is the meaning of the Gujarati word. Gandhi had a flash immediately when he saw the term. And he changed it to Satyagraha. Satyagraha, Agraha in Gujarati means firmness, holding on, not letting go, fixity. And that is the meaning of. So I think that Tirumeni has not understood the history of the way the term came into being and how Gandhi accepted the meaning. And also the Gujarati meaning of the word Agraha. Agraha is not the Malayalam Agraham. It is Agraha means holding on, firmness, adherence. These are the meanings of the word. And that is precisely what Gandhi meant by Satyagraha. That is one probably a minor kind of thing that I could notice in Tirumeni's interpretation of Gandhi. And the second is about celibacy. You know, what Christians call celibacy. And Gandhi used the term brahmacharya. Brahmacharya is the Sanskrit word. And the word brahmacharya means moving or traversing, traveling in the path of Brahma. So brahmacharya means, charya means moving, traveling in the path of Brahma. That is brahmacharya. And when you are serious about traversing the path of Brahma, seeking and trying to realize Brahman, then you have to have complete control over your passions and emotions, over your senses, including the most powerful of the human emotions is the sexual passion, because it is procreation and it is related to the perpetuation of the species. And therefore, it is automatically, naturally the strongest, the most difficult emotion to control. And so including that. So this is brahmacharya. And in Christian tradition, we call it celibacy. But the term that Gandhi used was not celibacy, but chastity. Not celibacy, but chastity. Chastity is purity, as you know. Chaste. It has also the meaning of purity. And Tirumeni is under the impression that Gandhi advised celibacy or chastity in the sense of abstaining from sexual relations in its full, total form, perfect, absolute form, to all people in the world, which is not correct. Because Gandhi said that, a couple, people should get married. Then Gandhi was asking, I mean, half jokingly, Gregorius Tirumeni was asking if the entire world adopts celibacy, then what would happen to the future of Homo sapiens? Perpetuation of species is essential, and that's also God's plan. You go and multiply. So Gandhi did not say that. Somehow Tirumeni misunderstood Gandhi. Gandhi said that even married couple can practice brahmacharya. The thing was that you must have control over your emotions, and you must have sexual relations only for the procreation of species, only when you want children, and only when for the sake of procreation of species you can have sexual relationship. It was not a total abstinence from sexual relationship. It was abstinence from sexual relationship for sensuous enjoyment. Because sexual relationship, Gandhi believed, or a person who believes in celibacy or chastity, as Gandhi understood it, can come into contact with the other sex and have sexual relationship only for the sake of perpetuation of the species, only for the sake of having children, and not for the sensuous enjoyment that goes with this relationship. So I think that Tirumeni did not understand Gandhi's concept in its total compass. And that was why he half-jokingly said that because Gandhi never advised complete abstinence to all people at all times. Somehow Tirumeni understood it like that. Or I don't know whether he was really making a joke at that time. But from what he said, this was what I have understood. Accepting in these two things, I think that Tirumeni had understood Gandhi properly. It was very easy because Gandhian philosophy is not very complex. Tirumeni could understand very complex systems of philosophy. The letter that he wrote to Heidegger probably is one of the most mind-boggling of letters that I have read. And therefore, he was a person who understood very subtle things. He could understand, who could read Nagarjuna with such ease and interpret Nagarjuna with such ease. And he was also a person who understood and explained the concept of emptiness in Buddhism, Shunyadavad, what is called the Shunyadavad in Buddhism, in its real, true sense. And therefore, it's very easy for such a person to understand Gandhi, because Gandhi explained everything in most simple terms. Gandhi's system of philosophy is not at all a complex system of philosophy. And so I don't think that it is a kind of a serious difficulty that Tirumeni faced in understanding. It was probably an oversight. And anyway, these are the two things about which I may say, with due respect to him, and that his assessment was not factual. Otherwise, he has understood, and he had great respect for Gandhi.
Sir, in what ways more Gregorius was able to help you in shaping a better theological and philosophical understanding in your intellectual pursuit?
What fascinated me most in Tirumeni was that Tirumeni's approach, philosophical or metaphysical approach, was a very inclusive approach. Very inclusive approach, because he read all systems. when he started studying Christianity seriously, he studied Neoplatons. He studied Gnosticism because he knew that Christianity got shaped the way it was shaped as a result of this kind of a trilogue, these three systems. So, and Trimeni did not rule out either Neoplatonism or Gnosticism because he understood that there were certain good things in both these systems of philosophy, which some Christians mistakenly consider to be anti-Christian or against Christianity. And from Hinduism, from Buddhism, from Jainism, and even from atheism, he was kind of able to examine and accept if there is anything. So his approach was philosophical or metaphysical approach, as far as I have understood it, is very inclusive. And that was Gandhi's approach also. It's not just a syncretic approach, but it was an inclusive approach. And therefore, this was what fascinated me most and what really made me respect and dialogue with Tirumeni. So I would call him kind of a Samanvaya Pratibha, one who wanted to integrate everything into a whole. And then the second thing was that, that fascinated me was the way he interpreted Jesus. He said that, Jesus loved everyone. And he gave his life for humanity, not for Christians. And so he was interested in the liberation of the whole creation. And also his understanding of the ultimate goal of life. God wanted creation to be integrated, to be reconciled, to be integrated, to be made a whole again. And who broke this whole? Human folly, the mistakes of creation. And therefore, God wanted the whole creation to be reconciled and integrated and made whole. And the joy of God, as far as Tirumeni understood and interpreted it, was to be in such a creation. If you read the first shloka of Isha Upanishad, which is one of the most, one of the favorite Upanishad of Mahatma Gandhi, and the first shloka formed a part of his morning daily prayer, Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam, Yatkim Jagatyam Jagat. Vasya is the word. And Sri Aurobindo has written at length about this term Vasya. What does it mean? Isha Vasyam. Creation exists in Isha, in God. God exists in creation. God, encapsulates entire creation. All these interpretations are given. And Tirumeni says that God is in creation. God wants to live. He uses the term which is, God wants to be in such creation. And to be with God in such creation is the ultimate goal of life. To be in creation, to be with God. So he has very clearly said that, to live in God, to be with God, to be joyful, to be peaceful, to enjoy the peace of the presence of God. That is the purpose of creation. And you need not go to a distant place called heaven to do that, because God is right here. And so we are blessed with the presence of God. The only thing is that we have to be active with God in making the creation whole, wherever it has been broken, reconcile, put it back to its place, make it whole. And so be co-creationist with God, so that you will be able to share the joy. This was more or less the position of Gandhi. Also, Gandhi interpreted these things in using different terms, because he was from a different tradition. And Gandhi was not a student of philosophy. And so Tirumeni was a student of philosophy, and therefore his vocabulary was rich in theological terms and all that. So I found an interpretation in understanding creation, in the concept of God, in the concept of the world, in the concept of human beings, human nature. There were several similarities between Gandhi and Paulos Gregorius Rimeni's concept of all this. And therefore, whenever I had some serious philosophical or theological doubts, I used to meet him and discuss with him. I remember that I don't know whether it will be relevant to say that I had very serious reservations about infant baptism. And therefore, I wanted to clarify it. And I could not look for a better person than Paulos Gregorius. He was not Paulos Gregorius at the time, he was Father Paul Varghese. He was in the seminary. So I went and I talked to him, and he went and met him and said that I want to talk to you. And he said that fine, but he was going to take a class for the students of the seminary and said that, okay, you will have to wait till evening because he said he's going to talk to the students for 5 hours with a break for 1 hour. So he said that if you have time, you can also come and sit in the class. So I went and joined the class and listened to him. He was teaching Epistle to the Romans. I attended the whole class for the whole 5 hours. Then we had tea. And then he took up this question and he gave his interpretation, which was not very convinced. I was not convinced at that time about the interpretation that he gave me. But, you know, what he said, I didn't have a piece of paper to take notes of what he was saying. But everything Tirumeni said was almost inscribed in my mind. So I went back. I had to go to another place, and after 2 days, I sat at night and wrote down the entire class that Tirumeni took. Even now, I have copy of that piece of paper. If you take it out, it will break into pieces. Then I went to Tirumeni later, and all these points I underlined. All these points were put before him, and asked him whether there was anything more to add or whether I made any mistake. He said that you have taken correct notes of what I said, and it's enough. So I have such experiences with him, which probably I am sharing this for the first time with you. Only my family knows it, that because the whole night I was writing down and from my memory taking notes and walking up and down to see the connections. And so my wife saw the agony, and so I had such a few occasions like that. Talking about some of the philosophers, Western philosophers. When I had a problem with Sartre, I was reading about, because I had to write a paper on existentialism. So some of the points of Sartre were too subtle and abstract. So I went to Tirumeni, and Tirumeni said that he went to sleep by reading Sartre. He could not cover 5 pages at a sitting. And that brought great relief and joy to me that I'm not the only person. If an intellectual like Paulos Gregorius Tirumeni could be sedated by, Sartre, why wonder that I have been thrown out of gear by his writings? So I had the opportunity to discuss and understand Sartre better because of his help. And like Hegel, Martin Heidegger, and some of the thinkers, not much, but very, very occasionally I had the opportunity to talk to him about this.
So if at all we talk about the qualities of Grigorius Tirumeni, there are numerous. But from your experiences for this generation and for the future generation, please tell us any 2 or 3 qualities that we can that can help us in formulating a better perspective about life.
No, the first thing was his unflinching, unwavering rootedness in his faith. He believed that everything sprang out of his faith. Because he believed in God very deeply, he believed in the role of religion so deeply, nobody could kind of challenge him in this. Nobody could shake him out of his faith. He was so deep rooted in that. So I think that this rootedness in faith, to have faith, to understand faith, it was not a kind of blind faith. It was he was able to explain things convincingly to people what he believes in. Of course, he said that, when you say that God has a plan, and this is what I think, you will not be able to rationally explain that. That's an article of faith, and so that's probably the best explanation that one can give. So that is one thing that, and then you look at whatever he did, everything was kind of a byproduct of, or everything was motivated by his faith, his deep faith. And Triveni was a hardworking person. Once he took up some work, then he kind of committed himself completely, dedicated himself completely to it. So I remember his last days when he had physical ailments. But in spite of his physical ailments, in spite of the kind of scorn that was poured on him by people who were expected to support him, they were trying to, particularly the peace initiative. Peace was a great dream of Triveni. So I was really impressed by his willingness to work hard, his commitment to causes, and his preparedness for self-sacrifice. Then he was a man of, I say, man of high self-respect, and he was not prepared to compromise his self-respect in front of anyone. However powerful he or she may be, he will not kind of compromise his self-respect, because he knew that his dignity is kind of divinely ordained, because he's a, as we read in the book of Genesis, God created us in his image. He believed that the root of his divinity is his dignity is divinity, because there is an element of the divine in us. Gandhi also believed that. So Gandhi did not compromise on violation of human dignity. He always wanted to uphold human dignity. So Triveni never compromised his dignity. He never bowed to power. So I think that was something that impressed me, his willingness to say no to anyone who deserved to be told no. So very powerful people, even Mrs. Gandhi and some other smaller people who were power drunk and power crazy, and he could very easily just walk out on them, on their face. So that is it. But I also remember that when we were observing his 60th Shashtabdi in Kottayam, people started praising him, kind of giving encomiums on him. And then Triveni stood up and said that I've been hearing this a lot. If I don't go back and read my Bible, I think I will become kind of proud of myself, which is a sin. So I don't want to think high of myself. I don't want to lose my humility. So I have to go and read my Bible. He said this openly and left the dais. I remember that. So he knew that it is necessary to be careful. A man of truth also should be a man of care, Gandhi had said, and Paulus Grigorius Triveni, I think, understood this. And so there were so many positive things that any generation, people belonging to any walk of life, whether you are a priest, whether you are a Christian, whether you are an intellectual, whether you are a student, anybody could learn from him. Very rarely do we get such people. When he was selected to become bishop. He was very reluctant, very, very reluctant. I remember the people of Collegiate, people from our place, wanted him because he was with us when he was Father Paul Varghese. And therefore we knew him, his capabilities, not only his capabilities, but also his commitment. And so we wanted him to be one. And he has openly acknowledged later that people of Collegiate were also responsible for his decision to overcome his hesitation to accept the election as the bishop. And so we are very happy that we could play a minor role in persuading him. And so we still hold him in very high respect, people of Collegiate, people of Medical Mission. I am a part of Medical Mission even now. I'm on the governing board. I'm one of the advisors. So we only very few days pass by when we don't remember this. Because when there is a crisis, we always look back and if Tirumeni was here, what would you do? So on. So thank you, Achan, for asking this question.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable insights and your time, especially for this interview series that help us to receive more insights and also the critical aspects from the life and legacy of Dr. Paulus Gregorius.
In the School of Gandhian Studies, there is a chair, Paulus Gregorius chair, and Father K.M. George. Probably there is no one more suitable than him to hold the chair. And so I associate with Father George and the activities of Paulus Gregorius chair. And that is probably one of the minor tributes that we can pay him in the people of Kottayam. Thank you, Achan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you.